Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Got a jam-packed show for you today. Later on the show in about 40 minutes, I got my Pac-12 football, college football insider, Jonathan Rifkind, joining the show. My best Malkin's moments up to date so far. So that's all coming up. Make sure to stay tuned for that. Hashtag JMalk, hashtag Morning Joe. Appreciate you making Morning Joe and J&J Media Network a part of your weekday morning plans. I do want to start with the NFL. A lot to get into today with the NFL. And here's what I've noticed. The NFL has changed dramatically. It's evolved immensely over the last 10 years. Before, and especially at the quarterback position, before the quarterback position used to be defined by accuracy and poise in the pocket. Those were the two characteristics that you had to have if you were a quarterback, right? You had to be able to throw accurately, and you have to have good pocket awareness to be successful. Now, to be a good quarterback, it's defined by two things: accuracy, which is still the same thing, and mobility. Can you run? Are you mobile? Do you possess elusiveness, an escapability factor? Can you pick up first downs with your legs? Can you make plays using your legs? Are you able to run and throw accurately on the run when you're scrambling out? Can you deliver pinpoint passes when you need to and not just rely on a great offensive line to give you some protection? The feel for the game is just as important as it was back then. You still have to have the feel for the game, but with the exception of Tom Brady and Drew Brees, you can't just take 3 or 6 step dropbacks and have time to deliver a football. That's not the way that the NFL works today, especially at the quarterback position. Now, while that's one important trait to possess, you have to be able to create with your legs. You look at the NBA. If you are a big going into the NBA right now, you're a center, you're a power forward, you have to be able to stretch the floor. You can no longer just run to the post, get your big behind down on the block, and go to work down there. You have to be able to stretch the floor, because if not, you're going to be a liability at the free throw line or on the floor. You're not going to be able to help spread the floor. Steph Curry was the biggest impetus for this shift towards valuing the three-point line, because he forced defenders to have to go out and guard him, because if you didn't, he would make you pay hitting a wide open three-point shot. And so now every single big, if you want to be effective in the NBA, you have to be able to hit an outside shot. Russell Wilson, in my opinion, has been the biggest impetus for this shift towards valuing a quarterback that can create plays with their legs. He's the reason why guys like Lamar Jackson, why guys like Kyler Murray, and now Jalen Hurts get drafted. These were all quarterbacks that, if you look at them in college, sure, they were extremely accurate. That was a big piece of why they got drafted, but it was because they had the combination of, okay, they were accurate and they could create plays with their legs. People weren't viewing them as elite prospects. Russell Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round. Jalen Hurts was drafted in the 2nd round. Most people think to utilize him as a Taysom Hill kind of quarterback, which is why it made that matchup so interesting that the two of them were paired up against one another. Lamar Jackson wasn't even viewed as a quarterback. Most people were asking him, were encouraging him to try out as a wide receiver, because they viewed him more as an athlete who could run versus an actual quarterback. The Eagles could not have hoped for a better start to what they got from Jalen Hurts yesterday. They could not have hoped for a better start. He created with his legs, picked up first downs, and we saw this spark take place last week against the Packers. This team was dead in the water. Jalen Hurts is inserted after Carson Wentz gets benched, connects on a 4th down and 18 touchdown that ends up sparking a special teams return touchdown. And yes, they lost that game, but moving forward, you said to yourself, well, it looks like we have something here. It was an official changing of the guard. And you saw the versatility, the escapability, the elusiveness from Jalen Hurts all on display yesterday. 17 of 30, 167 passing yards and a touchdown, but more importantly, 106 rushing yards yesterday. And he wasn't sacked. He wasn't sacked. For weeks, all we'd been hearing about was this porous Eagles offensive line giving up sacks to Carson Wentz, which are legitimate. Then you insert an extremely mobile quarterback, one who can create more plays with his legs, at least at this stage of his career, and he wasn't sacked yesterday. Think about this. This was his first NFL start. And the team that you're going up against in your first NFL start is, at the time, the NFC leading New Orleans Saints, the best defense in the NFL. They had won 9 straight games. And again, as I said, they had led the NFL in every statistical category over the past 3 weeks. They were on fire. But what we saw again is the play of Jalen Hurts inspired that Eagles sideline. You know, those players reacted to his performance from the Packers. It carried over to yesterday, and they wanted to play well for him. Now, listen, I don't know if I can say definitively that Jalen Hurts is going to lead the Eagles to a Super Bowl, if he's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. But here's what I do know. That style of play is conducive to winning now. You can rely, you need quarterbacks that are mobile. And what he's showing, and what Lamar Jackson was showing, and what Russell Wilson was showing, is that if you're accurate and you can run with the football and create plays with your legs, you're a huge asset at the quarterback position. And he is going to continue, just like Russell Wilson, just like Lamar Jackson, they're going to continue to pave the way and continue to blaze this trail for other young ascending quarterbacks coming up out of college, because now more of these players have a future. You see the type of prospect that Jalen Hurts was. And then the story, for it to culminate in a win like this, you think about his career, started at Alabama, got benched for Tua midway through the championship game against Georgia. Then the following year, Tua plays poorly in the SEC championship game. You insert Jalen Hurts. He leads you to the postseason. Then he transfers as a graduate transfer to Oklahoma, leads the Sooners to their 3rd consecutive trip to the college football playoff. Then he gets drafted in the NFL. Most people didn't think that was going to happen. And now he's the starter for the Philadelphia Eagles. So it's an amazing story. And every aspect of the Eagles' performance yesterday stepped up. The defense forced 2 turnovers. All of a sudden, they have a run game again. Miles Sanders, 115 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. All of a sudden, they have a run game again. So many aspects of this team that was missing before, we're seeing this all present. And not to mention, these were huge playoff implications. First of all, for the Saints, now you lose sole possession of first place in the NFC because you lost to the Green Bay Packers in week 3. So now you both have a 10-3 record, but the Packers hold that head-to-head matchup. So they're officially in first. And then the Eagles, it keeps their playoff hopes alive. Now, I'm not saying they're going to catch Washington at 6-7. I doubt it. Or even the Giants at 5-8. But I'll tell you what, I'm sure Doug Peterson and the Eagles feel much better moving forward, at least this season, with Jalen Hurts. They got a better chance now. So I was extremely impressed with his performance. And again, he is paving the way and continuing to blaze this trail of young quarterbacks in college where if you possess accuracy and mobility, those are the two things. That's how the game has shifted at the quarterback position. You can be an effective player. And you probably don't need to look that much farther to see effective players than right in the backyard of the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes yesterday, somehow they beat the Dolphins 33-27. They had no business winning this game. I've said this before in the beginning of the year. Champions can win in a myriad of ways. Many teams can dominate one facet of the game. Tennessee Titans can dominate on the ground. Certain teams can dominate through the air. We've seen the Seattle Seahawks lead the NFL in passing yards for several weeks. Some teams are great at coming from behind. Some teams jump out to early leads, right? There's so many different ways that teams can be defined, but champions can win in a multitude of ways. They're very versatile. They can dominate on the ground. They can dominate through the air. They can come back. They can overcome large deficits. And you look at this game yesterday, and just like every champion from before, the Kansas City Chiefs had no business winning this football game yesterday. One of my favorite games growing up was Mario Kart on the Wii. You know, with the wheel, and you can kind of just like turn around this wheel, and so you're playing in Mario Kart, and every once in a while when you're riding, you hit one of these translucent square question mark boxes that give you different power-ups. One of my favorite power-ups I remember is you get the bullet icon where if you're trailing in last place, you're all the way behind, it'll rocket you all the way to the front of the race. And on that path, it's knocking off any other rider that's on your path. The Kansas City Chiefs offense is like hitting that power-up button and you're getting the bullet icon. It's just going to knock off everything in its path, and it's like an airstrike that can just strike at any given moment. Any given moment, they touch the football, they can go score. Doesn't matter what the deficit is. Doesn't matter what point in the game. You turn on the TV, within the first couple minutes, they're down 10-0 in the first quarter. You're saying to yourself, wait, Patrick Mahomes has thrown 2 picks already. He hasn't thrown 2 picks in a game all year. They're down 10-0. And then you fast forward to the end of the third quarter, and they're up 30-10. They've scored 30 unanswered, and they've got the ball going into the fourth quarter. And so this team is just a jukebox. It's so unpredictable. And then not to mention, he ends up finishing with 3 picks. Patrick Mahomes has only had 1 game in his entire career in which he's thrown 3 interceptions. And it came against the LA Rams in what was maybe the most remarkable regular season game I've ever witnessed at the Coliseum when the Rams won 54-51. Mahomes threw 6 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And even in that game, they barely lost. In fact, the last 4 games, Mahomes in his entire career has only thrown multiple picks in 4 games. And that's in over 43 starts. The most recent example was in the Super Bowl against the 49ers last year, and they still won. And so it's just, you're watching this game, and you're thinking to yourself, this team has turned the ball over 4 times in this game, and yet they still had 30 points through 3 quarters. This team is just slowly traversing through this season. It's a grind. They're bored out of their mind. They're 12-1. The only thing that's keeping them going is that potential number 1 overall seed. That's what makes this game so impressive is, listen, at the end of the day, are you winning or are you not? You play to win the game. Chiefs do that, and they've won their 5th straight AFC West championship game. And so overall, you're saying to yourself, well, this team is clearly by a landslide the best team in the NFL, and they keep showing it week after week. And then with the Steelers' loss, now the Chiefs get catapulted into that number 1 overall seed. So this is extremely impressive for a Kansas City Chiefs team that, again, had no business winning this game. They had absolutely no business winning this game whatsoever. And here they are, top the AFC, as they rightly deserved. And I'm about to transition to another one of these teams that was atop the AFC in the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to touch on that loss in just a second. But just appreciate, again, I've said this before, appreciate what you're watching in Patrick Mahomes, in the Chiefs. They make it look so effortlessly. And again, once the postseason comes, guys, I think we're all in trouble. We're all in trouble. I'll put it at that. Morning Joe, right here on Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, YouTube, every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Thank you so much for joining me, Morning Joe, and all of us at J&J Media Network, making us a part of your weekday morning plans. Coming up in around about 15, 20 minutes, I've got my college football insider, Pac-12 expert, Jonathan Rifkind, joining the show. I am looking forward to seeing how he reacts to Florida's loss. Lot to unpack there. Let's stick with the NFL and transition to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Bills handed the Pittsburgh Steelers their 2nd straight loss of the season. They lost last Wednesday, so not even 5 days in between. They lost to the Washington Redskins, and then Sunday Night Football, they lost to the Buffalo Bills 26-15. Not to mention, this was the first time in 15 years in Sunday Night Football's existence that they went to Orchard Park at Bill Stadium. The first time in 15 years. The last time was when the 2007 New England Patriots with Randy Moss and Tom Brady went there and won. So for a number of sentimental reasons, it was really cool to see that atmosphere. But I've said this before. Every time that, there's a reason why throughout the entire season, whenever I've revealed my top 10 teams in the NFL, I never had the Pittsburgh Steelers as number 1. I just never did it. I never had it. I always consistently had the Kansas City Chiefs at number 1, but because of respect to Big Ben, to Mike Tomlin, and the Steelers just kept winning, I was hard-pressed not to continue to raise them in my weekly rankings. There's no other way that I could put them anywhere lower because they just kept winning. And even throughout their winning streak, even when they reached their apex of 11 straight games, I never had them above number 2. I could never put them above number 2 because my eye test was saying, listen, they're winning games, so you got to give credit to teams that are winning games. Again, at the end of the day, are you winning or are you losing? But there always seemed to be something missing. And I couldn't always quite pinpoint what their biggest flaw was. And then we saw the game against Washington, and it became much more clear. But I want you to think about if you're buying a used car, you go, or not a used car, if you're buying a new car at the dealership, you show up to the dealership, there's a new coat of paint on, car looks great, it's been tinted, luxurious seating. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Tires look good. Everything looks good. You got a sunroof. The whole thing looks great. Everything checks out. And you take it for a spin around the block a couple times. It's driving smoothly. There aren't any there's no roughness to it, right? And then you buy it, you commit to it because the salesperson's been talking it up the whole time. You tested it out yourself. It seems great to you. And then you buy it. And the longer you're driving it, the more you're realizing, wait a second, it's not actually reaching 0 to 60 in 3 seconds anymore. It's taking a lot longer to reach that top speed. And now it's slowly not even reaching that top speed anymore. Everything seems to be slowing down. And unbeknownst to you, someone pierced the tire with a thin needle, and all of a sudden air is starting to escape out of the tire. It's getting a little flatter and flatter. The Pittsburgh Steelers are like buying a new car. Everything looks great. And then all of a sudden, unbeknownst to you, you kind of have a little bit of a flat tire. And air is starting to escape out of the tire. It's like a gas leak that you didn't even realize. The valve is leaking a little bit. Yeah, you can patch it up, but it's still there. That's what the Pittsburgh Steelers are. Now, I'm not saying that the Steelers still aren't a good team. Listen, they've only lost 2 games, and I'm not going to overreact to the point where I'm not going to consider them an elite team anymore. Because at the end of the day, they still have the second best record in the NFL. But as far as, hey, should they be viewed now as a legitimate threat to Kansas City? Do I think they're better than the Buffalo Bills? Obviously not. Obviously not with those 2 teams. And they still have the same issues. There's still some prevailing issues, which are they still can't run the football. 17 carries for 47 yards. Yes, I guess it was better than the 15 carries for 21 yards against the Washington football team on Wednesday. But you're looking at 17 carries for 47 yards. That's just not going to cut it. Now, it doesn't help that Deontay Johnson dropped a bunch of passes. Eric Ebron has dropped passes. The Steelers haven't been able to hold on to the football too long. It seems to be a recurring problem over the last several games. So I'm not fully all out on the Steelers. They're still 11-2. And the one thing I did like, they did limit Big Ben's number of passing attempts. They dialed that back. He was 21 of 37, 2 picks, 2 touchdowns. So it wasn't a good game for him personally, but at least he's not throwing 50 passes. And again, probably 5 of those balls were dropped balls, so they could have been easily caught for first downs. But Steelers gotta figure it out. They gotta figure it out. Now the Bills, listen, this is a legitimate team. This is a real team, a real Super Bowl contending team. I love their formula. They've got an ideal winning formula right now. They've got a young and not only promising, but delivering quarterback in Josh Allen. They've got a solid run game right now with Zach Moss and David Singletary. They've got a star wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. Their defense is starting to play better, more opportunistic. Tre'Davious White, Josh Norman in the secondary. They're getting pressure up front a little bit more than they were before. And they've got a young and kind of blossoming head coach. 46, Sean McDermott. He's doing an incredible job with the Buffalo Bills. And the rapport that you see Josh Allen have, not only with Sean McDermott, but most importantly, Stephon Diggs. That's been the difference this year. That's been the difference this year because you look at Josh Allen and the question marks coming into the season were always, can he be accurate with the football? And he's completing 68.5% of his passes. 6 most passing yards this year, 29 touchdowns. 28 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He's playing really well, and the confidence is oozing out of him right now. The team believes in him. The coaching staff believes in him. And most importantly, I would argue, Stephon Diggs believes in him. Stephon Diggs is having a career year. He leads the NFL right now in receptions with 100. He's got over 1,176 receiving yards, which is the most for his career. He's had 3 straight seasons of over 1,000 yards receiving, but this is his career high. And he's on pace to build on that career year, because in 2018, his career high in receptions was 102. Now he's at 100 with 3 games left to play. So he's got a career high. He's about to have a career high in receptions. He already has a career high in receiving yards. And their rapport, it's palpable. You can feel and see how much they enjoy playing with one another. And so I love their formula is super conducive to winning. They've got all the pieces there. The other thing that I like about them is they play in an outdoor venue. I think that come postseason time, being able to be versatile enough to play in any kind of weather conditions and inclement weather, indoor under a roof in a stadium, I think that's going to play to their advantage. And especially if they lock up the AFC East, which they're 1 game away from doing, then that first opening round game of the playoffs, they host a playoff game. And then from there, you never know what happens. Depends what maybe the Steelers and the Chiefs do. So the Bills are really positioning themselves right now. They're hitting their stride at the right time. They've won 3 straight games, 6 out of their last 7 games. So I've been really impressed with them. This is a legitimate team. This is a legitimate team right here. So want to shift just some quick thoughts on the current NFL playoff picture right now. Super intriguing matchups this weekend. First of all, let's start with the NFC. Tampa Bay now is I would almost argue is almost a shoe-in to make it. I think with that game against the Vikings, they're pretty much going to hold them off. They're 8-5 right now. This was a huge win for a team that was struggling. Was it a pretty win? No. It was an ugly win. Did they get bailed out by the fact that Dan Bailey was 0 for 4 on kicks? Just unfathomable. 0 for 3 on field goals. Missed an extra point. Sure, that helped. But even with those field goals, I still think that the Buccaneers find a way to win the game. So I think it nearly iced a playoff spot for the Bucs right now. They're 8-5, and they've got 2 games against the Falcons and 1 against the Lions. I think they're going to run the table. So I think they're in a great position right now to make it. And then on the flip side, the Cardinals, I actually think, was a really underrated game against the Giants, which was extremely important for them to have. Now they're 7-6. They at least bought themselves 1 more game of a 1-game lead over the Vikings. Now, I'm not exactly sure who's got the better divisional ranking record. So if the Vikings and the Cardinals end up finishing with the same record, I'm not exactly sure who the tiebreaker goes to because they haven't played against each other. But I do know that the Cardinals, this was a must-win game because, first of all, it's unprecedented to send 3 teams all from the same division into the playoffs. And right now, they're holding on for dear life to that final playoff spot, that final wild card spot. So a big time win for them. And this was also against the Giants team that was playing really well. And people were starting to view the New York Giants in a different light. So Cardinals snap a 4-game losing streak that was important. They had lost 5 out of the last 6. So good for them to snap that losing streak and get back in the win column. They're 7-6. That's a big time win for them. And for the Giants, now you lose control over the NFC East because Washington won. So that has major implications for them as well. And then the Bears now entered the playoff fold. I didn't even have them in my playoff picture last week because I guess I just didn't really think about them. But technically, they've got the same record as the Vikings, and there's actually a huge matchup. They're playing the Vikings this week or next week. So how crazy would that be if all of a sudden Nick Foles, or I guess Mitchell Trubisky rather, could engineer a comeback for the Chicago Bears? That would be a hell of a story. And then transitioning to the AFC, for me, the Colts are a shoo-in to make it into the postseason. Right now, the Titans have the edge over the Colts, but they're both 9-4. I've said this before. The Colts have been my dark horse team all year making the postseason. I actually projected them to go 10-6. I think right now they're on pace to even eclipse that mark. And this was a much-needed win for the Colts to give them a little bit more cushion, a bigger blow to the Las Vegas Raiders for sure. And they've got a huge matchup against the Miami Dolphins, who I'm going to touch on in just a moment. But Colts look good. My boy Jonathan Taylor was fantastic. I know Jonathan Rifkind, when he's going to join the show soon, is going to have to concede that was a fantastic game for him. 150 yards running, 2 touchdowns. If you dropped him in fantasy, sucks to suck, man. You should have played him. You should have started him. He was fantastic yesterday. And he's a Wisconsin guy, so I'm happy for him. And more importantly, finally, Phillip Rivers and the Colts finally are utilizing T.Y. Hilton. Thank God T.Y. Hilton is back and a part of this team. I don't know why he was never utilized up until this point. They finally are using him now, and it's paying dividends. 84 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. He's back in the offense. He's healthy. So big win for the Colts. Raiders, again, probably have to win out. They're 7-6. They play the Miami Dolphins, who also now no longer control their own destiny. The Miami Dolphins do not control their own destiny anymore. They're 8-5, but if the Ravens beat the Browns tonight, the Ravens have not the head-to-head advantage, but they have a better record in their division, and so they would leapfrog over the Dolphins. So the Dolphins have to hope that the Browns continue this incredible streak of winning, because if the Ravens win, Ravens are in that final spot right now. So you've got the Colts or the Titans, whoever you're going to take at 9-4. That's the first playoff spot. If the Ravens win tonight, that would be 2. And then the Cleveland Browns at 9-3. Those are the 3 playoff spots right now. So the Dolphins, they're not out of it for sure. And they play, again, a big matchup against the Raiders next week. So they're not out of it. But if the Ravens win tonight, they no longer control their own destiny, which is crazy to see. So they really kind of opened the door for some of these other teams. Okay, finally, just really quickly for about 2 minutes, I just wanted to touch on some of my first impressions from the NBA preseason. There were 4 guys in particular that I wanted to just give a quick shout out to. And then Jonathan Rifkind, my Pac-12 expert college football insider, is going to join me. So first of all, it was a great sight to see Kevin Durant. He played yesterday for the first time in over a year and a half after rupturing his Achilles tendon, missed a year and a half. 15 points, 5 of 12 shooting, whatever, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, whatever, 24 minutes. It was just such a great sight to see Kevin Durant back. You see the energy that he plays with and the efficiency with which he can score. I'm still knocking on wood for him. I still kind of hold my breath when he's shuffling side to side. I'm knocking on wood that he stays healthy. The NBA needs him to stay healthy. Me as a basketball fan want him to stay healthy. And I love the way that he looked starting out. Again, his first NBA game in over a year and a half. Can't imagine the types of butterflies he was having, even though it was an empty stadium at Barclays in New York or in Brooklyn. He looked really good. He looked really good, to be honest. And it was just great as a basketball fan to see one of the all-time greats and arguably a top 3 player, top 2 player. Some people have him as the number 1 player in the NBA coming back to the floor. And I actually think that he and Kyrie Irving coexisted pretty well. They had some pretty good chemistry. It's early on. We'll see if they draw each other nuts. If more reporters start shifting over to KD. Hey, why is your buddy not answering questions? Yeah, that might end up taking a toll on him. But for right now, it seems to be working. And the other thing that seems to be working early on, I like what I'm seeing from John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins. Again, two guys that are coming off injuries. John Wall's missed the last 2 years with a heel and Achilles injury. DeMarcus Cousins obviously tore his ACL. They're former Kentucky teammates back in 2009, 2010 at Kentucky. So it's nice to see them playing together with the Rockets, even though I know James Harden still wants out of there regardless. John Wall looked pretty explosive. Listen, the guy hasn't played in 2 years. So the fact that he had 14 points on, I don't know exactly what his shooting was, but he had 9 assists, 5 rebounds. Listen, again, the guy hasn't played in 2 years. So I like the explosiveness that I saw from him. I just like to see him back. He's kind of been out of sight, out of mind. And again, the Wizards traded him and a protected future first-round pick to acquire Russell Westbrook. Rockets got John Wall and the protected first-round pick. So I liked seeing him and DeMarcus Cousins. Listen, I feel badly for DeMarcus Cousins because when he injured himself in Sacramento, he cost himself over $100 million, like $130, $150 million. So I want to see guys get the bag. I want them. I don't want to see them derailed by injuries like this. So impressed with him. But the guy that I was more impressed with, you can say this is hometown bias. I don't really care. If you're an NBA fan, did you watch Talen Horton-Tucker yesterday on the Lakers? Did you watch this kid play the last 2 preseason games? 33 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists against the Clippers. I know it's a preseason game. I got it. But this kid can play, man. 6'4", 235, got a 7'1" wingspan, drops 33. The Lakers already have depth. This is the deepest Lakers roster that LeBron James has ever had. And arguably that the Lakers have had in a long time. And now you have a kid who just turned 20, barely, perhaps actually just forging a little role for himself. He's just kind of created a little role for himself. I think he can be an extremely productive player. And Frank Vogel admitted that this is going to be a little bit tough, what to do. And I love the story that Wes Matthews talked about in the first preseason game against the Clippers, where Kawhi Leonard goes up to Wesley Matthews and is like, hey, how old is this kid, Horton-Tucker, right here? Is he like 19 or 20? And Wesley Matthews didn't even know his age. He's like, oh, he's 19 or 20. He goes up to Talen Horton-Tucker, says, how old are you, man? Oh, I'm 20. Damn. This kid's special. I'm not going to get too excited. I already have my core with the Lakers, but I like what I'm seeing from him. So that's the wrap for that. Now joining me is a friend of the show, Pac-12 expert, and college football insider Jonathan Rifkind, who just got a fresh haircut just for me. Really special to see that.
Yeah, all 2 weeks ago, just for you, Jonah.
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
Well, either way, it's appreciated. Johnny, always good to have you on the show. So I thought about you right away. I was trying to think about where I wanted to start today. And I'm going to get to the Pac-12. I'm going to give you a chance, but I do want to start with Florida's loss because, First of all, I do think it's apropos that LSU was the team to knock them out of playoff contention just because listen, there's all this heart of a champion, right? And at the end of the day, sure, LSU's had a down season, but it probably felt great to wrap up their regular season knowing they just knocked out Florida, who had a chance at making it. And so I think, to me, listen, Texas A&M is in a great spot right now. I think Cincinnati is in a better spot than they were obviously before. I still don't know if they would get in, which I'll ask you about. And you know what? For even Ohio State, I think this was really big because even though Ohio State, if they go undefeated, it was kind of assumed that they would make it in. Some pundits had a Florida team that was one loss if they were to beat Alabama in the SEC championship game, leapfrogging an Ohio State team. So to you, what were your reactions to Florida losing, and what kind of impact do you think it has on those 3 teams that I just mentioned?
No, that's a great point and a good setup for it, Jonah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, what it really is a big reason why the committee may not put Ohio State in, even if they're a 6-win undefeated champion. Why? Because look at Florida, right? Florida's 7-1. It took them 8 games to lose to a team that is now 3-5, to a team that was at the bottom of the SEC, to a team that had 6 freshman defenders on the field against Kyle Trask, who was arguably in the lead for the Heisman coming into the week. Now, we can talk about Harris, we can talk about Mac Jones, but it was Kyle Trask coming into the week. So, aside from it being LSU, aside from it, and for everybody who said that it was a shoe, that was the reason that Wilson threw the shoe at the end of the game that lost the game. No, that was a key moment. And if you hear Dan Mullen's post-game interview, he even said that was a key moment, but that's not the reason they lost the game. They lost the game way earlier than that because they let LSU stick around. They let LSU get an opportunity to kick a 48-yard field goal in the fog, and York nailed it, and the defense clamped down, and that was that. Florida made a critical mistake at the end of the game, but they made plenty of mistakes leading up to it that eventually led to that loss. So this is a couple. What ends up happening, Jonah, is this screws everything up, right? When a committee goes and votes on Tuesday, they throw out the previous week's rankings. It doesn't matter. Okay, every week is a fresh week. Now, you can sit here and say, okay, that may be a little bit BS because you can see teams like Georgia staying in the top 10, right? Indiana back in the top 10, even though they lost Penix. You can look at USC jumping from 20 to 15 after only one convincing win this season, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday. We'll get to that. I have a feeling here in a couple of minutes, USC specifically in their game against UCLA. But when you look at Florida losing, it ruins the implications for Ohio State, right? It hurts Clemson's chances if they end up losing the ACC championships. Notre Dame is a 2-loss team getting it. It helps Cincinnati and the perception surrounding it, but the odds are, even if Cincinnati is ahead of Texas A&M going into the final week of voting in the college football playoff, chalk needs to fly, but A&M probably has a better chance than Cincinnati, an undefeated American champion in Cincinnati at the end of the day. So this Florida loss opens the committee's eyes to the fact that the uneven playing field that we have been watching this entire season, based on it being a COVID season, based on the conferences being left to determine their own schedules and the fate of their own teams, there has to be some sort of reconciliation, right? And putting a 6-win Ohio State team after seeing Florida and the hype surrounding Florida losing the 8th game of the season makes you understand, okay, maybe Ohio State isn't so safe. And if you look at some of their games, I mean, they took Penn State. Penn State took them, I should say, at the time, an 0-5 Penn State down to the wire, right? It's Indiana, one possession game. Indiana had an opportunity. Now, Penix wasn't going to throw that ball in the end zone, but they had an opportunity to at least come back and win that game. So, Ohio State's the brand recognition, but Florida losing it doesn't ruin, but it really hurts their chances of getting in as a 6-win champion.
The other thing that I think is interesting, Johnny, is I look at a team like Clemson, for example, and I actually think that, kind of as you touched on, it actually is almost really beneficial for Clemson as well, because now listen, I'm not expecting this to happen, but let's say that there's a scenario in which Clemson loses again to Notre Dame. But let's say the game goes to overtime one more time and Notre Dame is ranked number 2, which they are right now. Do you see any scenario in which, hey, a 2-loss Clemson, whose only 2 losses of the year are both in overtime to the number 2 team in the country, Notre Dame, still stays in the top 4? Maybe Ohio State jumps to number 3 and they slip down to number 4. Do you see any scenario in which Clemson with 2 losses could remain now that Florida's out and Texas A&M, their last game is against Tennessee? Or do you not really see that potentially happening?
No, I don't. I think if Clemson loses, Clemson's out. It's unfortunate, but the way that this has gone and the perception that has not been shaped for the committee, I don't think it's going to happen. It would have to be an insane football game where Notre Dame wins on a game-winning field goal in overtime for Clemson to get in. I just think that a 7-1 or an 8-1, rather, Texas A&M team with that win over Florida, even though it is a little bit, it's not negated, but the credibility isn't as strong because they lost to LSU. I think that they would get the benefit. Now, what's more is that the FPI was released yesterday, the percentage of each team in the top six that the FPI, the ESPN FPI, calculates based on these analytics. And actually, USC currently has a better chance, percentage wise, of getting in over Clemson. And that's under the assumption that Clemson loses. So they're saying that if USC goes undefeated, and we still don't know. I mean, USC basketball just canceled 2 games because of coronavirus cases. Now they shouldn't be interacting, but there's a chance the football team also has some cases. And we don't know if Washington's ready to go, which means that Oregon would replace them. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to find out between today being Monday and tomorrow being Tuesday. This championship's supposed to be on Friday. So it may not be USC Oregon or USC Washington or Washington USC in that order, right? It could be something completely different and screw everything up. But if everything happens the way it's supposed to happen and USC sweeps, Clemson loses, A&M unfortunately is screwed out of the SEC championship because they play in the West with Alabama, USC would get in over a 2-loss Clemson team. Cincinnati, okay? Cincinnati is in the unfortunate position of being a group of 5 team. They're a very good football team. Coastal Carolina, same situation. They're probably going to go undefeated. They play Louisiana Lafayette in the Sun Belt Championship, and not an easy matchup. Never an easy matchup, Louisiana Lafayette. But if Coastal pulls that out, they're going to be a top 6 team probably. I think that they're going to come in at number 8 on Tuesday when the committee votes, maybe even number 9. We'll see what happens with Georgia. Georgia should not be ahead of Coastal, but they probably will just because they blew the socks off of number 25 Missouri this past weekend. So if Cincinnati wants to get in, it's going to have to be a USC loss, it's going to have to be a Clemson loss, and it's going to have to be an A&M loss. I think that that's the only way, unless the committee says that we value an 8-0 Cincinnati American champion over a 6-0 Ohio State Big Ten champion. I don't think it's going to happen. Now, if Ohio State loses, or if the credibility just isn't there, and Clemson loses, well, then you could see A&M and USC get in.
Now it's interesting.
Alabama, exactly. I just don't think unless every single Power 5 champion, with the exception of Alabama and Notre Dame, lose, Cincinnati is just not going to get in, and that's the unfortunate reality of being a Group of 5 team in today's day and age.
I want to stay with the Pac-12. Listen, sure, I'm not a USC fan. I'm a UCLA fan, but I do think that the Pac-12. Listen, I'm from the West Coast. I'd love to see a Pac-12 team get in, but I'm gonna be honest, Johnny. I know you laid out all those scenarios right there, but USC is number 15 right now, and I mean, listen. As much as I want to give credit to Chip Kelly and UCLA for saying, "Hey, you got your guys playing better and they're more respectable," they're still 3-3. Like, this isn't a really good team. And USC's really only had one truly convincing win this year, and that was at Utah. That was an impressive win, and a team that just beat the only other ranked team in the Pac-12 in Colorado. But I just don't see USC even as a top 10 team right now. And to be honest, they're playing Washington. I think, is that the Pac-12 championship game?
It's the Pac-12 championship
It's
game.
the
Now
Pac-12
we're still not sure if Washington's going to be able to go.
They might not be able to. They're 3-1. They're unranked. Johnny, I'll be honest. I don't see the Pac-12 making it again. Do you?
So to be honest with you, I don't. But USC on Tuesday will be a top 10 team. Remember, they throw out the rankings. In the previous week. It does not matter what week 2 or week 3 of the college football playoff rankings were. They throw them out, they sit down and they talk and they start from scratch. So what that means is it doesn't matter that USC is 15 this week. If the committee values USC as a top 10 team, then they're going to put them as a top 10 team. They don't freaking care, right? And so what ends up happening is, yes, you get this mess of perception of, oh, how could USC have jumped? Well, in the committee's eyes, they didn't jump. In the committee's eyes, this is a fresh week, and USC is an undefeated team in what is actually a competitive Pac-12 conference. Jonah, UCLA is 3-3, but they were a bad pick 6 at a half by their backup quarterback away from beating Oregon. They were a bad spot away from beating Arizona State, and they were it was another one possession loss in that game against Colorado. This is a team in the opening game of the season. This is a team that could easily be 5-1. That's the crazy thing. And they could have beaten SC. They could be 6-0. So this is not a bad UCLA team. This is actually a very good UCLA. Demetric Felton is one of the most explosive, dynamic running backs in the nation. DTR had almost an immaculate game up until that interception at the end of the game. And it took USC, again, the fourth quarter to come back for the third time this season. They had to do it against Arizona State. They had to do it against Arizona. And they had to do it against UCLA. This USC team is largely underwhelming. Now, did Tyler Vaughn have an insane catch to save the game for them? Yes. Did Amon-Ra St. Brown get a nice fade in the back of the end zone to secure it for them? Absolutely. These wide receivers, these skill players are better than any other. Honestly, USC is the best tandem wide receivers in the nation. I don't think it's arguable right now. But the execution hasn't been there, right? Graham Harrell decided to run the ball 18 times for the first time this entire season, and you don't see that in an air raid because UCLA, their defensive scheme is what you do to stop the air raid. They didn't do anything wrong, but USC was able to adjust offensively, and Malapay had a great rushing game. He had, 15 carries coming into the game. He had 18 in the game, and he had 2 touchdowns. So USC adjusted. The team that adjusts to go in and win is typically a good team. And so USC is going to be valued as a good team. USC is also name and brand, even though they're the third winningest team in the Pac-12 since 2010 behind Oregon and Washington in that order. So when you look at sort of how all the pieces come together, no, USC does not appear to be a top 10 team in the eyes of the people following the Pac-12 closest. Ryan Leaf and I talk about this all the time. But when you look at the FPI, which is the analytics machine that ESPN has, and now remember, ESPN controls the show. ESPN owns the rights to the college football playoff. They own the rights to the committee and to the drops. Reese Davis goes on Ryan's show every Tuesday as the rankings are released to discuss it with Ryan and Jason Horowitz. ESPN makes this thing as poignant as possible. So when you look at those FPI rankings, it's not some BS, man. Like, there's something to that. So when USC is the fifth team out, and they have a 48% chance ahead of A&M with a 45% chance and ahead of Clemson with a 37% chance. Yes, you're not predicting the future with these FPI rankings or with these FPI percentages. Apparently, USC is valued pretty high nationally. That's, again, because of brand recognition, because they're undefeated in a conference that from top to bottom is actually pretty good. Arizona's trash. God awful. Did they almost lose? Absolutely to Arizona. But the rest of the conference, it's pretty good. And for USC to be at the top of it right now, to the committee, that's saying something. And that's why we're going to see them being a top 10 team come Tuesday.
All right, really quickly, because we got like 1 minute left. I'm really interested to see where the committee puts Iowa State this week. Because to me, listen, Johnny, I don't know how many Cinderellas I necessarily believe in, but I do know this. Oklahoma has found its way into the college football playoff in 3 straight seasons. And the way that things are shaking out right now with Florida losing again, if Iowa State ends up coming in at number 6, for example, and let's say Clemson loses, Texas A&M doesn't have the SEC championship game, right? They're playing Tennessee, and Oklahoma just wallops Iowa State in this Big 12 championship game. I don't personally see it happening, but next thing you know, Oklahoma could be back in the college football playoff.
No, it's impossible. A 2-loss Clemson team will get in over a 2-loss Oklahoma team simply because Oklahoma's playing Iowa State a game, a team they already lost to. If Oklahoma had 2 losses to Texas and, I don't know, throw in a TCU loss for all intents and purposes there, because they beat Texas also, and then they beat Iowa State in the regular season, then they go and they beat Iowa State again, okay, that's convincing to me. But if you split the season series in the Big 12 championship and in the regular season with Iowa State, who's currently ranked ahead of you, yeah, that looks good, but they're going to leave you out. It's not going to be strong enough to beat a Clemson team who beat UNC, who beat Miami, who beat Virginia, who beat Miami and UNC, right? Who beat Virginia Tech. Yeah, they lost to Notre Dame with their backup quarterback in South Bend on a chilly evening during coronavirus times in overtime. So, no, I don't think Oklahoma has a shot. I honestly don't think Iowa State has a shot. I still think a 2-loss Clemson team, a 1-loss Texas A&M team, an undefeated USC team. Honestly, Jonah, I think that an undefeated Cincinnati team would even get in over a 2-loss Oklahoma team, even if they're the Big 12 championship, because they have to play Iowa State again.
I
And
mean,
yet,
I'd prefer to see it. I'd prefer undefeated at Cincinnati to make it, just to see how they would do.
the problem is they're going to get out. Oklahoma serves a better chance against Alabama than Cincinnati does. Nobody's going to touch Alabama. I mean, Mac Jones is on another level right now. I mean, Harris is on the entire team is just so
Right.
unbelievable.
No, listen, that's true. They look fantastic, and Devontae Smith has been unbelievable.
Devontae Smith.
He's garnering Heisman consideration
If the
too.
Heisman wasn't a quarterback award, he should
Right.
get it. But unfortunately,
So
it's just the system.
So I want to shift to their biggest rival, Auburn. Very, very quickly, your quick reaction. Listen, Gus Malzahn, he gets let go after 8 seasons. Do I think he's the best coach in college football? No. But you're talking about a guy in 8 seasons that at least, in his first year in 2013 took the team to the BCS title game. They've been to one, they've split one SEC title, 2017 Georgia. Listen, he's still 6-8-35, Johnny, in 8 seasons. Like, I understand, you want to see results, but in a pandemic year, he goes 6-4. You have to buy him out for $21 million when you know that colleges left and right are hemorrhaging money. Like, I understand we want to see immediate gratification, especially in the SEC, but like, I thought that this was just way too premature. Listen, if you want to get rid of him, that's one thing, but at least have the decency to wait till the rest of the season is completely over with, as opposed to just kind of, I understand like signing period is coming up in a couple days, but really quickly, what's your reaction to Malzahn out at Auburn?
I'm shocked that he was fired at this point in the season, like you just said, but I mean, he should have been fired 2 seasons ago. It's just a program that has been underperforming for the last 4 seasons. And look, they're mediocre in the toughest conference in the nation. It's not an easy conference, but it's Auburn. This is a program that is supposed to go out and compete with Alabama every year, and they don't. They don't even compete with the likes of Florida, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M sometimes, right? Like, Auburn shouldn't be better than a 4-loss team year in and year out, and he just is underperformed and he's undersold. Now, really quickly to your point about the buyouts, typically when it happens in a year when schools are hemorrhaging money like this, it comes from boosters. The boosters are able to pull together $21 million. At South Carolina, it was $17.5 million. At Arizona, it's $18.5 million for Kevin Sumlin. These schools aren't taking the money out of the students' pockets, right? We hope out of scholarship funds, out of tuition. It's boosters who are typically the reason that these coaches get let go, and then they're the ones who then collect the funding through fundraising, through their own booster incentive, whatever, to then cover the cost of firing these coaches. Because at the end of the day, they want somebody to be the head of the program that is going to lead them to success. So they're willing to put in the money to get rid of the guy they don't believe in and bring in somebody else that they do, for better or for worse. So Gus being gone at this point of the season, it's tough. But look, we're already seeing teams decline bowl bids. We're seeing teams that are, players are opting out for the rest of the season. Chuba Hubbard being a great example of that. So I think that we're basically at the end, and teams don't want to wait to make the decision whether or not they're going to fire their coach, right? Arizona did it on a split second after they lost 72-7. Will Muschamp was fired 5 or 6 games into the season at South Carolina. Lovie Smith was let go at Illinois last week. I mean, we're probably going to see Hugh Freeze leave, even though he just signed an extension at Liberty, because now there's some pretty good coaching opportunities on the carousel. So, look, it's again, this is a really bad season because of the situation, and so every school was forced to make tough decisions. And is it shocking for us on the outside? Absolutely. But when you peel back the layers, it kind of makes sense in a way. And at the end of the day, nobody knows what right or wrong decision to make right now. They're just going to go with their gut and hope for the best, because that's all we can do during the COVID season.
Always good stuff from Jonathan Rifkind, Pac-12 expert, college football insider, host of Just Recruiting and Believe in the Pac-12 with Ryan Leaf. Johnny, always good to hear from you. I'll check in with you again soon.
Appreciate it, Jonah, as always. And by the way, you said that I have to concede about Jonathan Taylor.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but he has been playing much better than the last time you and I talked about them when he was only getting like 30% of the snaps. So look, I'm happy with the guy too. The Colts are fun. Phil Rivers is my guy. He's played 200. He started 267 consecutive games, and I have TY on my team. And in playoff time, they are finally getting him involved. So I am fully on the Colts bandwagon with you right now, my friend.
Always love to hear it. All right, Johnny.
All right, talk to you soon.
Always good stuff from Jonathan Rifkind. So happy to have him with us. And then final topic of the day, Malkin's Moments, my favorite segment every week. Pick my favorite moments from the past week. So I got 2 for you this week, and then we'll wrap up. So the first one, Derrick Henry has been a monster this year. Not only does he lead the NFL with over 1,500 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, but this guy just rushed for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns for the second time this season. He's done that 4 times in his career. That is the most ever. He surpasses Barry Sanders, LaDainian Tomlinson, and Jim Brown for the most rushing games with 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in a game. Derrick Henry, King Henry, anointed that title. He's been fantastic. Again, on pace to pass his career high last year that he set in rushing yards with 1,540 rushing yards last year. He's at 1,537 now, had 16 rushing touchdowns last year, has 14 now. So he's on pace to surpass that number. And the Titans, listen, I don't think that an MVP is going to come out of their team, but he's the leading front runner for MVP when it comes to the Titans. They're 9-4 right now. So this is extremely impressive. And then finally, this is the final thing that was extremely interesting to hear. So the Cleveland Indians, after holding that name, the Indians, for 105 years, have dropped the Indians as their name, as their official name. This was the longest active streak to hold on to a nickname for a franchise. They originally established that name in 1915, so they're discarding that. We're starting to see this trend, right? The Washington Redskins, the former Washington Redskins, dropped the Redskins as it was viewed as insulting to Native Americans and to a Native American culture and their imagery. So we're starting to see this trend in professional sports teams starting to drop these nicknames that might appear to be a little racist or offensive, and they're the latest to shed that Native American injury. The Cleveland Indians. Previously, the team had been called the Cleveland Naps after Nap LaJolie. Apologies to the star player and manager. And the Cleveland Indians, they've played, or I guess now just Cleveland right now, they've played 17,000 games under that name, and they haven't won a World Series in 72 years, which is the longest drought in the MLB. So those are my 2 Malkin's moments. Great show today. Wow. Can't believe we're on to episode 21. We're already midway through December. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.